Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Snapchat, Reddit, House Party, Clubhouse. How does the church navigate this social media tsunami? Stick around and we'll talk about that. Welcome to the Here at Home podcast, a podcast about the people here at McGregor, their stories, their ministry, and their love for Jesus. And if you're joining us for the first time, my name is Mark Bricker, and I'm the host for the Here at Home podcast. And thank you for joining us. We'll bring you a fresh new episode every other week, and we'd love to have you be a part of our Here at Home podcast community. So go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already, and that way you'll get each episode delivered straight to your podcast player. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it with your friends. So, welcome our guests today on the Here at Home podcast. We have in the studio Jeff Eskridge and Christian Miller. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Pastor Mark. How are you?
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Well, I am so excited to have you guys because this is somewhat of a unique podcast for us, for the Here at Home channel. And we are so glad to have you guys because really this whole thing kind of happens because of you in different ways. And so we'll get to that in just a moment, but we are really, really glad to have you both here. I want our folks to hear a little bit more about who you are, just in case they don't know you. So Jeff, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about your family and your position here at McGregor.
Yeah, so Jeff Eskridge is my name. That's what I typically go by. I am the Director of Graphic Arts here at McGregor. Been here on staff for 15 years.
Wow, 15.
And yes, I'm a native of Florida. Christian, you are too?
Yes, I am.
All right, so there's two.
2 out of 3.
Two out
Florida
of 3.
crackers
There's only
right here.
three total left. So, yes, so I am married. My wife, Shelly, and this year will be 25 years for us.
That's awesome.
I've got a daughter and a son, both in college. The daughter's wrapping up college, and the son's just starting.
Oh, awesome. All right, so that's, did you give us their names?
Bethany and Chase.
All right.
Yeah.
Got a little shout out to the kids.
Yeah, a little shout out.
Not that they're probably listening to the podcast that Dad's on, but you never know.
Dad.
Yeah. All right, Christian, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah. So, well, I'm a Florida native, as that was
Were you
discussed.
born right here in Fort Myers?
I was.
Lee Memorial or Health Park? Or?
I don't know, actually.
You don't know?
No, I don't know,
A little bit
actually.
of trivia. You
See,
might
I'm
wanna-
on the East Coast, and you're West Coast.
I am.
East Coast,
Fort Myers. I've been going to McGregor for my whole entire life, actually. Born and raised here. I am currently finishing up school. I'm going to Full Sail Online. I'm
What's
getting
your
a bachelor's degree in cinematography.
Cinematography.
So, yes, pretty exciting.
And what's your title here? At
I
McGregor?
am the digital media producer at McGregor Baptist Church.
All right, one sentence. What does that mean?
Yes, so I oversee all social media, video, like special media, like videos and stuff like that, and including podcasts.
Including podcasts.
So I'm also, I produce all of the McGregor podcasts here at McGregor. So.
And you're now on the Here at Home.
Yes, I know.
podcast.
It's kind of weird. Usually I'm in the back.
Yeah. And so
like
that's
switching
what
the cameras and everything.
makes it really unique is that you typically are the one that's producing this in real time. And so to have you out here is awesome and appreciate that. And I know we've got Bobby helping out, making sure
flying the
everything
plane.
happens. Yeah, flying the plane for us. Exactly. All right, so let's dive right in because I said at the very beginning that we're going to talk about social media and the church's response and how do we handle it because we live. Let's face it, we live in a very social media world.
Yes.
I listed just a handful of some of the more popular social media platforms, but there are a lot. Jeff and I were talking before we started recording that I pulled up a podcast, 101 social media platforms in 2021 you need to be aware of. And like 101? And
gosh.
yeah, there's a
Wow.
lot. So you got a lot of work to do still, Christian.
Yes, I do.
But is this something that the church should deal with, should navigate? I mean, how do we navigate it? And so I know, Jeff, you've been wrestling with this question for a lot longer than just recently. And so kind of back us up a little bit and talk a little bit about the history of McGregor and social media and kind of that process that led us to where we are today.
Yeah, so the past 5 years, and probably even more than that, maybe 10, but really the past 5 years, if I can say that.
It's been fast,
it's been fast. We've really been trying to focus and emphasize our social media presence, and we got our social platforms up and running, and looking at trying to dial in our live stream, our video live stream, but. Over those years, it's always been like, one day our social media, will just, become more and more relevant and that much more important. And that one day really actually happened, especially in 2020 when we went into the lockdown with COVID.
COVID hit, yeah.
But it was really cool to see God's providence in all of that, because during that time, again, we were getting all of these pieces in place, and then the lockdown hit, and we needed those pieces to be in place.
Right.
And God had just orchestrated all of that to happen. And just a quick fun fact, our live streaming that we do, Sunday to Sunday, we just turned on our live stream to Facebook and to YouTube really about a month before the lockdown happened. And we rolled that out quietly, just to do it because we could and we wanted to. But that was already in place, and then the lockdown happened and we needed it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So we were already streaming our services on our own web page,
Right.
But now all of a sudden, right before the lockdown, right before everything happened, we had switched it, or not switched, but added 2 other platforms that we definitely needed at that point.
Yeah, we had to pivot. We had to do a lot of pivoting
absolutely.
in a lot of different ways, a lot of different areas. But yes, that's when social media really became a core component of our communications during that time, especially.
Yeah.
And so, being on social platforms, nothing to be afraid about being on social platforms. That's where people are. And that's how they're typically connecting. So we want to get our voice out there too. We want to meet people there in that digital marketplace, if you will, that social space. And so now we are. And going through that, coming out of the lockdown, we started having those conversations. Okay, so what do we learn? What are we looking to do now? What does all of this mean? And so we started having those kinds of conversations about, okay, everything's kind of gotten fast forward. That one day that was off in the distance, really it's right now.
It's here, yeah.
It's here.
And I know I had a chance to be a part of some of those meetings, and coming out of those meetings, looking at different priorities. One was we need somebody to handle that, because like you said, I think the tension over the last 5 years, we know it's important. We know it's going to get more important, but we only have so much bandwidth.
Right.
So we can only do so much. And so then when COVID hit, we realized we had to do it, and we were doing it maybe to the expense of not doing some other things during that. But boy, it would be great if we had somebody that could spearhead that. And so that's how this whole digital media producer position came to be. Now they do more than just what we talked about there, but that's a big part of it. What else came out of some of the discussions during COVID and those group meetings?
We talked about a lot of different things. How do we ramp up, our social media presence, and how important it is? And you probably heard this more than I did, but a lot of people at that time were just saying, I am so thankful that I'm still able to connect to my church in this way. And we saw the importance of that, and that time in between Sunday to Sunday, connecting throughout the week. That we started our live at 7:55.
Yeah, I remember the old live at 7:55.
Yeah. And that was something brand new. We just turned it on, just started
threw
going.
it out there. Let's see what happens. Yeah.
But the fruit of that, being able to connect with our church family, was so important.
Yeah.
So vital. But again, going back to your question, coming out of that, we knew that we needed to continue, and we knew that we needed somebody to kind of spearhead this effort, and so the digital media producer position came out of that. And the things that we're doing now, that position really kind of anchors all the things that we're doing now.
Well, let's talk to that person that now has that title,
Yes,
digital
it is
media
me.
producer.
That is me.
I think position was being crafted and designed, the job description put together, I think a lot of folks were thinking About You Christian would be a perfect fit for that, and I think they were right, and you've been a super addition to our staff team. let's talk a little bit about what you do as it relates to digital media.
Yes.
If that's what you're producing here, what does that look like? So give us a rundown of some of the major things that you focus on in a typical week.
Yeah. So usually my week kind of starts with, social media. Obviously, that's kind of the backbone of what I do.
Were you pretty familiar with? Was that something? Because I know making movies, cinematography, and then social media don't necessarily always go together.
It doesn't necessarily line up, but but I understood content, and that's one thing that I love is content and how can we make it available, essentially. So a lot of that I do is content creation. So like I'm making videos, I'm doing still photography, and podcast is a lot of what I do. But social media wise, back when I was hired, Jeff was like, "Hey, I want you posting every day," and I was like, "Every day." That's a lot. That's a lot to think about. So I had to come up with a plan. Like, what does that look like? What does a church post? And so, like, what content does that look like? And so there's a lot of different audiences that I had to really think about, like a new time person, somebody that hasn't been to McGregor but is randomly stumbled across us. What can they, if they come to our site, like they can, when they come to our social media platforms, like they're looking for the culture, they're looking for like what songs do we sing on Sunday? Like what do we preach about? How can they get connected? What's the community like? And so that's a lot. That's a lot. And then on top of that, we still have our congregation. So like, how can I encourage them? How can I, throughout the week, be a resource to them and to help them?
So we're guaranteed one fresh post at least once a day.
Essentially.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But when all that started, Jeff like really had kind of framework of what each post kind of had to be, and so you can go over that.
Yeah. So there was a lot of that first touch, that kind of that audience you were talking about, you know, people that are brand new to McGregor and in our church family. And again, kind of going back to all of those years talking about social media and the kinds of content that we were wanting to put together. I boiled it down to my 3 E's, and going to do my alliteration because that's what we do at McGregor. But it's my 3 E's are basically educate, encourage, and equip. And all of our content, those definitions or those words are kind of broad in their definition, and sometimes they overlap. But educate is essentially getting to know a ministry or hearing about a ministry, getting to know what a ministry does and what's happening in that area of ministry. All of that to our Bible study time, you know, opening up God's Word and studying God's Word. So that's educate. And now the second one is encourage. That's where we look to see if our content can edify the body of Christ.
Right.
How can we encourage each other? How can we sharpen each other? How can we come alongside of you? How can we build you up? What kind of content can do that? And then the last one is equip. And this is where I think rubber meets the road. This is the kind of pulling everything together. We want our content to be able to be shared and to be just another tool in your toolbox, in your tool belt, for you to go out and have a gospel conversation with somebody. How do you start having those kinds of conversations? Sharing content is just an easy way to do that. Yeah, to get to know the church, to get to know a ministry, but ultimately to open up a gospel conversation.
Absolutely. So we've got content that's being created for social media and whatever other platforms, and I'm sure there's a lot of other things that you're doing. Let's talk now, because as we look back to 2020, one of the things that came out of that not only was the need for a position like a digital media producer, but also a place where we can produce content. And so we're sitting in a room that did not exist. Well, the room did, but it did not exist in this state a year ago. It was some offices, and now we have a really nice place where we can produce content of all kinds. Primarily, we do our podcast in here, but it also can be used for other things. So, Christian, talk with us a little bit about this room. What is this room set up to do and designed for?
Yeah. So this room, well, at first it was spec'd out to be a video studio, but podcast kind of like took over. So essentially, this room, I love this room. We have a couple of different podcasts here at McGregor.
And we'll talk about those in a minute.
Yes, we will. So this room actually, all the podcasts get shot in this room. And so when we were designing the layout, we were like, how can we make this room look completely different for both of our shows? And our awesome designer, Trudy Evans, did a phenomenal job. Basically, between each show, we literally shift the whole room in a way that makes a completely different design. And so, like, your podcast is on one side of the room, then Talk Truth is on another side of the room, and it has a completely different feel. And that was the feel that we were going for. And Trudy did such a cool job with creating that. So. Yeah.
And I know we can't, we don't have our own little camera where you can show everything, but it really is neat how it's set up in here.
Yes.
It just seems to be working so well for our podcast. Okay, so let's talk about our podcast because,
let's do.
2020 hit and we started talking about wanting to create, a podcast. So kind of walk through both. I'll let both of you kind of walk through how all this came about, that we now have multiple podcasts.
Yes.
So me, okay. Just like you were saying, out of those conversations, coming out of the lockdown podcast, and so I was thinking, okay, well, we will get our podcast started. I wasn't really sure what the content format was going to be, but bringing on Christian and starting to talk with him and looking at what we wanted to do. Well, it kind of grew from one. It didn't kind of grow. It did from one channel to three. And so here we are.
When you say channels, it's essentially shows.
Shows, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Because I know that was in trying to explain that to my wife. It was channels. No, there's three different shows.
Right. Yeah. And Christian, you can probably share what those channels shows, are now.
Yeah. So, from the get-go, like during the hiring process, like one of the things that like in my job description was podcast, and I was like, podcast? Like, we ain't got no podcast. And then from there, I started to think about like, what does it take to do a podcast, and then like what are the different formats and also like structures. And so like I started to I looked at different companies and different podcasts and how they kind of like structure their line. And so I came up with this idea: how about we have just one brand, the McGregor Podcast brand, which is an umbrella essentially. And within that umbrella, we have three different podcasts. We have the McGregor Podcast that has the Sunday sermons and also Beyond the Notes, which Beyond the Notes is one of my brainchild.
You came up with it.
Something like that. It's a saying. I don't remember. And basically, Beyond the Notes, I love it. Basically, whoever taught that Sunday will be able to come in the studio, and basically they'll have like 10 to 15 minutes or infinity, depending on who it is. And they'll be able to elaborate. Pastor Russell, if you're listening, you don't know that. And basically they can go on, like, rehash what they taught. Like, how did they get to that?
Or share things they didn't get a chance to get to in the message.
I've never taught before, so I mean, obviously you can.
Yeah, rehashing doesn't sound all that appealing to listen to, but I think being able to share some things that were not able to be shared live on Sunday morning, they'll be able to do a little bit more.
Yeah. For instance, when we were launching our John series, Pastor Russell, we launched it on Easter, and so Pastor Russell was like, "I'm going to use this beyond the notes to kind of go and provide more detail and more context behind John, essentially."
Yeah, no, it's been a wonderful way to
yes,
because anytime you preach, you always have a lot more information than you have time to deliver. And so having this as an outlet to follow up and to be able to share more is wonderful. So,
yes.
So good idea.
Thank you.
All right. So that's Beyond the Notes.
Yes,
what else you got?
Yes. And then Here at Home, which clearly you're listening to it right now.
One of the most awesome podcasts.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Make sure 5 stars. 5 stars.
Yes.
5 stars. And then Talk Truth. So Talk Truth is hosted by Chloe Weimer.
Who's Chloe?
Well, actually, I don't know why I feel like I want to share this, but her younger sister, Julia, like I've known her like forever. And she actually like asked me out to homecoming one year. In fact, we were freshmen. So
well, there's a little tidbit that we didn't see coming. Yeah.
So Talk Truth, Chloe actually started it before the McGregor podcast.
And well, wait, Chloe's a teacher here at at our school
at SFCA.
Yeah.
And so she started Talk Truth just for a resource for her students, essentially.
She's a Bible teacher.
And yes. And so she was doing that by herself. I mean, she was literally recording it from her iPhone, essentially, and publishing it.
Yep.
And when I saw that she was doing that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's super cool. And this was way before I started here at McGregor. And I was like, man, if only there was a way that like somebody can pick this up, like this would be really, really cool. Little did I know I would be working here at the church. And when back to the conversation of like, hey, we're doing podcasts, I was like, oh, well, I know somebody that does a podcast, and I know somebody who would probably really love to like join our podcast community. And so back like Christmas time of 2020, I was like, hey, Chloe, I'm going to be the digital media producer here at the church. Like, you want to?
I'm a big shot now.
I guess so. Look at there. And I was like, you want to bring Talk Truth to McGregor podcast? And she was like, wow. I was actually thinking about like, what is the next season of Talk Truth? And just so happens that you came to me. So it was really a really cool transition to bring her on and to see where Talk Truth has gone and how it's grown. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, that really is neat. Yeah. And specifically her show deals with questions typically revolving around Bible questions.
Yes.
Topics that are something that would come up in the study of God's Word. Here at home, and unless this is someone's first time listening, they already know, but we try to focus on folks that are part of our church that in their ministry or their service or even just their story, their personal story. We've loved hearing some folks just share what God's done in their life and their heart. So, yeah. So those are the 3 podcasts: Beyond the Notes, Here at Home, and Talk Truth.
Yeah. And that's just another one of those evidence of God's providence, going back to Chloe, how her podcast already existed. And then we were able to bring her in.
Yeah.
So that's just really neat. It's an awesome way to see God working in that way. And again, for our podcast to be 3 different shows and to see how it's hitting different needs, different formats. And we had that extra, piece or that extra component with like Beyond the Notes. They all have enough bandwidth to allow for the extra formatting that we didn't really have a way to share before, but now we do.
Right. Okay, so you're posting on social, and when we say social media, what are our platforms that we use?
Yeah, so we're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
Okay. Plan on adding anything in the future? No.
Possibly.
All right.
Oh. You heard it here first.
Oh, yeah. I don't even know about that.
Heard the rumors here.
Do you guys want to have a meeting right now?
Catch me aside about that. No.
Okay.
I do not.
Not yet. So you have the responsibility of posting daily on our social media platform. You're also producing 3 podcasts. And what are some other things that are involved in being a digital media producer? Don't you have something to do with Sunday morning?
Yeah, I direct.
The video?
Yes. So I switch the cameras essentially, and I work with our awesome camera operator volunteers, and they do pretty awesome. And I just let them like compose a shot, and I'll take each shot essentially and let them know, hey, somebody's singing next. Make sure you pick them up. So.
Yeah, and I know there are a lot of other things. You support other ministries and do different things. What's the thing that you're most excited about in your role as digital media producer here at McGregor?
Yeah, being able to encourage others has been really cool. Because I mean, when I was creating the calendar, the social media schedule, essentially day by day, like that's a lot of content. Right. And like, how am I going to produce this content every week? And it's new, fresh content. And so really what I ended up doing, I came to this conclusion. I was like, well, Sunday mornings, like we put a lot of time and a lot of resources into it. I mean, we have a lot of people on staff here that focus on Sunday mornings, right, which is awesome. But how can we take that and spread it throughout the week? And so that's what I ended up doing pretty much. So like the way that I see Sunday mornings is really, it's a gold mine of content, gold mine. And so gold mine. And so basically like I will, first off, early in the week, I will basically post a scripture verse that was taught on that Sunday. And then from there, I will post the song of the week. I mean, on Sunday mornings, like the songs that were sung, at least for me, is the melody. It like sets the melody throughout the week. And so just singing those songs throughout the week is really a big factor. And so being able to post one song that we do early in the week, just so that it can be a resource for somebody to go back and listen, is pretty cool. And there's a lot that goes into the song of the week, like a lot.
Do people vote?
No.
What wins to be a song? Wouldn't that be fun?
Oh, gosh.
Maybe we have a song of the month. We take the 4 songs of the week.
Oh, no.
Or the week for the month.
That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, so there's a really big process.
More engagement that way.
This is true. Well, so basically the way that the song of the week works is like Ryan Flint, our music minister, will basically like, he will pick the song out like within like 2 weeks in advance. And then from there, it will be like, he will choose whether if it's like an 11 o'clock song or like an 8 or 9:30 song. And then from there, like based off of how the song went, like if it was at 8 or 9:30, we'll be like, hey, like I like this one, or hey, I like the 8, or I like the 9:30. And then from there, Ryan will approve. And then come Monday, our sound engineer, Bill, will basically remix the song that you're listening to. And he's remixing it just so that it sounds better from a mobile device. And so come Tuesday, that's when I come and in the morning, and I'll do the premiere and schedule it for that night. So there's a lot that goes into that. And then so that we have the scripture, we have the song, and then we have the soundbite of the week. And so basically that is a minute video that comes from the sermon from whoever was teaching. And so usually Jeff will be listening. He actually moderates all of our live streams, and which is pretty crazy awesome. And so he'll be listening, and he'll find like a time code, and he'll email it to me, and I'll basically find it, and then I'll transcribe it, and that's what you see on Thursdays. So there's a lot that goes into that, because by that point in time, my thought process is like, you're probably not thinking about the sermon, but like when Thursday comes, like that's when it's like, oh, I do remember Russell saying that. Yeah, I do remember that.
That is cool. I love that. You made a statement about, something about we have this gold mine of content.
Yes.
And I pulled up a note from somewhere in 2020, I was making kind of a list of things I was learning and things that and one of the things I put on here is we need to be better at capturing our content. And that was, now that's exactly what you're doing is you're capturing this awesome content we have and redistributing it in other forms and other fashions so that it can be an encouragement or a blessing to others that maybe didn't get to see it in the first time. Or if they did, like you said, it reinforces something to hear it again.
Yes.
And so I think there is so much value in capturing that content and being able to use it in different ways. Yes. Even the going back to the podcast, the sermon podcast channel that's going to have the Beyond the Notes, it also has the sermon.
Yes, it does.
And for a lot of people, having that available in that audio format that they can just, they're on a run or exercising or whatever they're doing. Thanks. They have a chance to listen to that message for the first time or the second time or the third time. And it's a great tool. We're capturing the content and being able to utilize that. All right, did we cover all the aspects of what you do as a digital media producer pretty much there?
Pretty much, yeah.
All right.
In that sense.
All right, so now let's kind of wrap this. Let's bring this in for a landing because we started off at the very beginning. I mentioned these different social media platforms. How are we as a church? What's the plan that we do engage, and we want our members to engage in this? Because a lot of people think social media, it's bad, or social media, that's not for me. How are we? What is our strategy to use these platforms for the glory of God?
I think probably the personal challenge that I could just share with everybody is whenever you listen to one of these podcasts, or if you see one of the pieces that we post out on our social platforms, always have that mindset of, how am I going to share this? Who am I going to share this with?
Right.
And, there may be a name that comes up. And again, the goal is, going back to that equipping, the goal is to get you to have that gospel conversation with somebody. And this is, again, just one of those tools where you can get started having that conversation. And I'll just tag a little bit onto that. One of the easiest ways to actually start a conversation with somebody is to ask a simple question, and that is, do you have a church home? And just asking that, it's a non-threatening question, but just to actually take that first step. And if they say yes or no, say, great, I want to tell you about my church, and we've got a podcast. And I was listening to this one episode, and I was thinking of you. And here's something that I wanted to share, or here's a song of the week, or here's something that we heard this weekend from the pulpit. And what are your thoughts on that? Or here's a ministry that our church is doing. Maybe you and I can go this week, and be part of that event that they're doing. So, do you have a church home? That's a real practical, easy question to get started with that conversation. And again, the challenge is to whenever you come in contact, whenever you absorb or consume any of this content, think about how are you going to share it.
Yeah, it's not just come into me, but also the opportunity to share those blessings. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we have had a great conversation about social media and all that, how it impacts our church. And I so appreciate both of y'all because really, all that you do when you think about the impact and the reach of the ministry, when you think of communications and digital media, social media, you guys have an awesome opportunity. And so we're so grateful God has both of you here and working together. And
well, thanks. Be sure you like, share, subscribe.
Yeah, comment. yes. All you can. Give us great reviews.
Yeah, all of that stuff, wherever you're listening
to.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this wraps up, I think, another episode of Here at Home. Thank you guys for joining us and being a part of the podcast. And thank you, listeners, for being a part of our podcast as well. What a blessing it is to be able to share what God is doing here at home and to be encouraged together. And as we always say, if you haven't subscribed yet, please take a moment to do that. And while you're subscribing, you might want to check out our other podcast channels that we were talking about. You can do that over at the hereathomepodcast.com. Get all the details right there, Christian. You got that all set up? Yes. All right. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks right back here at